Well, what will we think about the next album, Bjork and Homogenic? And in the opening montage, you heard Bachelorette, and now you're going to hear All's Full of Love. Matt, what do you got?
All right.
Stats?
Homogenic by Bjork comes in at number 17 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 2 in 1997, number 90 of all time. It is Bjork's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It also made, Homogenic also made Rolling Stone's list at number 202, and Bjork is ranked number 34 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Now, Josh, I have to say, I am fascinated about what this bio leading up to this is going to be thematically here. Because I didn't cheat. I am super curious as to what was going on here.
Well, I will tell you. Bjork was born Bjork Groman's daughter in 1965 in Reykjavik, Iceland. We covered her 3 times so far. When she was in the Sugar Cubes, back on season 3, bonus 24, her debut solo album Debut, season 4 episode 22, and her second album Post, season 4 episode 44. So this is her third album, solo album. She has 11 studio albums, with the most recent being Fossora in 2022. Genres include art pop, avant-garde, electronica, and electropop. Influences, punk rock, jazz, Kraftwerk, Brian Eno, Shaka Khan, Kate Bush. Similar artists, Aphex Twin, Tricky, Joanna Newsom, Grimes, Laurie Anderson, Charlie XCX. Highest single on Billboard is Earth Intruders, reaching 84 in 2007, and her album Vespertine reached 19 in 2001 on the Billboard 200. So this album came about because, she was working on it in London, but she was getting too much media attention, unwanted media attention, after surviving a murder attempt by one of her fans. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. We didn't talk about it in the last album.
I don't remember murder attempt
yeah,
being
you would,
discussed.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A person, tried to, a fan, kind of a crazy fan, who is, I believe, still in prison, tried to murder her, and she survived. And so that is one of your answers, John, to what it came about from this album.
I knew that there clearly was shit going on based on lyrically and how this sounds. So I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So,
and then, so she decided, I need to get out of London, and she got an offer by one of her, I think, producers or collaborators to go to Spain and produce it there. So that's where she went. Mark Bell was one of the producers on it. There's multiple producers, but Bjork would cite him as a major musical influence on her career. She said, quote, "If I were to say who has influenced me the most, it would be Stockhausen, Kraftwerk, Brian Eno, and Mark Bell." He did die, unfortunately, in 2014, I believe, in his 40s, of complications from surgery or something. Bjork decided to enter her work with producer Neely Hooper, who had produced both Debut and Post. She said they felt that, quote, they had stopped surprising each other. Crazily, Wu-Tang almost contributed to the production of this album, but couldn't, due to Wu-Tang Forever taking longer than anticipated. So I can only imagine.
I mean, on one hand, yes. On the other hand, no. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, RZA was too, but he wasn't even having female relations. Remember?
Yes, he was too busy.
So many records.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bjork wanted Homogenic to be have a conceptual focus on her native Iceland. She also said she wanted to create an album with, quote, a simple sound and, quote, only one flavor. And a majority of the songs have lyrics about love and failed relationships. The title has been speculated to be suggesting the concept of home and the word homogenic. The album cover is pretty striking, and that was designed by British fashion designer Alexander McQueen. The look of that. Joga and Bachelorette, the singles, They were the first and second singles and had videos directed by Michelle Gondry, who we've touched on before in one of her previous videos, or another artist did Michelle Gondry as well. All Is Full of Love was released as the fifth single and had a DVD single as well, and some publications consider it the first DVD single to be released. I assume that means it had the music video with it or something. I don't know what the significance of a DVD single would be other than having more data. And the music video for that was directed by Chris Cunningham. And that's what I've got for Homogenic. So, we love Bjork. Dude. We love Bjork around here. Isn't she great?
By the way, I'm reading the story of this murder attempt. It is fucking wild, dude. Like, this whole thing. This guy's like incel adjacent, and he's taping these video diaries, and he's definitely not alive. He killed himself.
Oh,
so.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. I didn't want to spend too much down that rabbit hole and give
Holy
him
shit,
attention and stuff. Obviously, he's dead, so I guess it doesn't matter. But but you're right. It is a crazy story. So let's start with you, John. What did you think of Homogenic?
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes is Bjork is still Bjork here, but this is dark Bjork, whereas before there's this sort of childlike thing and naivete at times, but also you feel like Bjork sees the world in a sensory way or a perception way that it's kind of funny. It's like she's both childlike but also sees deeply in certain things, and a lot of her music for me is the first two albums it's this club music once she gets out of the Sugar Cubes, right? It's this club music where she's pushing that sound mixed with this sort of avant-garde art rock aesthetic that instantly with her voice is I've always processed Bjork's voice as an instrument of its own right, and it's both charming but also jarring depending on how she's using it. It's a very versatile weapon. It's an acquired taste, but it's because I've always known what Bjork sounds like, it doesn't jar me in the way that if it was your first time listening. But it becomes clear immediately when you're looking at these lyrics. You're it feels as if she's ended a relationship, but also in an existential way where she's at a break with herself, and the songs themselves are sort of dark sounding and dark thematically. Even the picture of her on the front of it is this wild picture of her in sort of would you say geisha girl meets Star Wars type vibe, I'd say. And you're just
she looks
wow,
really uncomfortable in that neck thing.
It's Victorian. It's Victorian, or those women in Africa that wear the rings around their neck. They're I said, it's the princess in Star Wars meets a vaguely Asian vibe dress wise. It's hard to, but it's also a striking visual that sets the tone, I think, for what's going on. And the whole time I'm this album has to have a story because there's too much thematic linkage, right, lyrically and sonically, for it not. And that's what really ended up standing out to me about this album. You've got all the things I think of with Bjork. It's let me process all of these sounds and the way that this album is being produced. But maybe it's because she's not with Nelly Hooper on this one, but it's doing some of the things that Bjork did in the other albums, but there definitely is a different there's just a different energy to this album would be the way that I'd describe it. And the only way I could describe it is sort of it's a very introverted and a very darker, not murderous dark, or angry dark, more a little bit of, I don't want to say questioning your sanity type dark, but a little bit your world's falling apart.
Yeah, there's an existentialness to it.
Yeah, isn't there? And that's where I'm I figured there were a lot of different things that hit. It felt like an album where she experienced losses, whether it be of people in her life or relationships or professional I just knew that there was some element of loss, and also some element clearly of the death of something and the reinvention of something else. And it's just weird to hear Bjork like stay in that lane. It would be one thing if it was like one song you're like, oh, that's, you almost feel like on the other two albums it would be like, oh, that's like the sad song for Bjork, you know what I mean? But she's gonna come back to being, you know, on this energy of like awe and joy and worldliness and childlike wonder, right? And there's like really none of that on this album. And that was the first listen, my initial take. It's like, oh, this is a very different energy. And my second take was, I thought this album had a lot of really interesting starts to songs, whether it be like Alarm Clock with what like that's going with, where it's sort of like a reverb, drum and bass type kick in, that is like a slow starter. Then there's a very electronic, almost computer game type beginning to 5 years. And it almost like with each of the songs, you're like, let me follow, like pull a string, right? And see where it ends up at the end. So I really like this album quite a bit. I would say of the 3 Bjork albums we covered, it took me the longest to like this album, but once I got there and I kind of realized what it was a little bit more, I really enjoyed it. But I had to reinvent my expectations. And from that end of things, it was pleasant, because I was worrying a little bit of like, is Bjork just sort of like really interesting in terms of the sounds she makes, but then subject wise she's kind of just Bjork, and I almost like didn't give her credit enough for like the depth of where she can take it. And so it was a good reminder to me to not pigeonhole folks that I don't have enough of their catalog in front of me, because 2 albums is not enough to get there. So but like you couldn't see like, you know, It's Oh So Quiet, right, on this album. There's no space for a song like that, right? Like quirkiness here. It's sort of, she took out that quirky part of her personality and became, you know, an artist, but a different type. So yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, man, Bjork does it again. Really, this is gonna be another one of those artists that I'd probably put on a list of like top 5 or top 10 artists that, like, you know, really glad that we're kind of getting into their stuff, because wasn't really familiar with any of it. Yeah, it's definitely, yep, it's definitely darker, it's bleak, it's dramatic, right? I think a lot of Bjork stuff is dramatic, but this seems even extra dramatic. You know, her voice is really shining here. It's the Bjorkiest version of Bjork as you can get. It's kind of like when Dylan went on, you know, Blonde on Blonde and really leaned into it. You know, I feel like there's parts in here where she's just kind of really like leading into her unique vocal styling. And it
soars at times, right?
Yeah, man. She's just got great pipes, and you know, it's another one of those voices it's like a distinct voice. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a traditionally like good sounding voice, and I could see it being off-putting to a lot of people, but not to me. I think it really works. And yeah, there's some really interesting things happening musically in here. This is, interestingly enough, covering Radiohead next. But you know, she's doing Radiohead, like, you know, 2000s Radiohead, like several years before they got there. In some ways, with these like experimental, you know, electronic, you know, kind of things, working with DJs, you know, that type of thing that Radiohead really got into, as being, that's reinventing themselves in that way. And yeah, it's a grower as well. I wouldn't say that I hated it, like the corner shop. It wasn't my initial reaction was like, I hate this, but it was definitely, because I remember the last Bjork album that we covered, the first track comes on, it's like a Nine Inch Nails, like, you know, kind of industrial rock sound, and it's like, you're hooked in right away, and you're like, all right, let's do it, you know, like, what a great opening, you know. Hunter does not open like that, you know what I mean, like, and actually there's no song on here that was quite like that. So John's right, it takes a little bit of a while, you know, take some time to kind of adjust your expectations and adjust how you're listening to it. But just the more that you do, it's another album that you hear more into it, you get more into it. The second listen was way more enjoyable than the first one, and it got better and better. And, you know, I like how, you know, there's some songs on here that are quite orchestral, that are just, you know, there's a lot of strings on here, that are kind of a little bit more, I don't know, classical in nature, right? But then you also have songs like, especially towards the end, like Alarm Call, Pluto, like these songs that got that have it's very electronic, right? She's kind of starts to lean a little bit more into some electronic sounds in some songs as well, with beats and cool, like, different interesting loops and stuff. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say that it's a record that I could put on at any time, right? It's like an anytime record. This is sometimes it's a little bit of a, you want to prepare yourself in some ways, or at least get into the right setting, right? And I think headphones is a great way to listen to this. I think I was able to listen to it on headphones, and kind of takes you to a little bit of a different place, or just you can kind of hear a little bit more of the intricacies of what's happening. And yeah, very cool. I would say that the tone overall is very similar, but there's plenty of different things happening within each song that keeps it interesting. And it all kind of fits well together. So yeah, I can't say that I paid attention to the lyrics, but I think that, it doesn't take much to realize, like, okay, it's a darker, bleaker, like kind of dystopian in some ways, I think, at times too. So like that's where, like, some of the stuff, like the influence that she's talking about, like Kraftwerk, certainly, like, yeah, you can kind of, I wouldn't say that this is krautrock, but in terms of like some of the electronic stuff that they were going for, the like kind of like the stark and sometimes cold nature, I think kind of that can kind of come out here as well, just sonically. Which I'm totally fine with, right? Like, I think sometimes I really like, that dark, that minor key, that darker kind of like ominous sounding, type of music can really resonate. And I think, man, she's mad talented artist. Let's keep covering Bjork, man. It's really good stuff. And I can see why this is her best album. It does seem like she's kind of, growing, maturing a little bit, and musically. But those first two albums were still really good too. So I'm curious to see where she goes after this. But yeah, big thumbs up. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, the strings were provided by the Icelandic String Octet, just for some context there. But I'm with you guys. I really like this album. She's fully eschewed the like electropop nature of her initial startings. She's definitely gone to a darker place as well. And this album just kind of, this is going to sound weird, but it did feel Icelandic to me, if that makes sense. Like there is like a there is like a sparseness and like a kind of Nordic nature to this album that I pick up on. It is more serious, like John said, and darker, like you guys both said. So as a result, I think it's like also her most like challenging album to date. I feel like she's incrementally like upping the challenge level on her albums from what we've heard so far. And so I did feel prepared in that respect, but also, like, I think like you said, Matt, like it does take a certain mindset for this album to get into the headspace of where she's going. There's an interesting dichotomy between like all of kind of the electronic music production that she does, contrasting with like her vocals. I feel like that's such an interesting thing that only she does. Like in some ways her vocals are so like ethereal and like I said, soaring, and they kind of they change on a dime and stuff like that, but they feel so human, albeit like Icelandic, but the kind of the backing music often feels more clinical in some ways, or I don't know what the word is, but there's I find there's an interesting contrast between her singing and the songs. There's no kind of like dance elements anymore in her albums. There are these real like kind of operatic types of works. She's able to scream at times. She does some like, I can't remember what's the song towards the end where she like repeats the thing over and over again. I think maybe Pluto or Alarm Call or something. She does that on.
Oh yeah, I forget which song that was. I know what you're talking about. She goes higher, and you think she's gonna stop, and it's like, oh no, she's going. Oh, and she's gonna go again after that too. Yeah.
Okay. She just does so many different things with her voice that a lot of artists can't do. That being said, like because this album was challenging, like I didn't like it as much as I did the first two albums. So I think it, like you guys said, it requires more like thought and consideration and more listens to me. There's no sort of songs like Bachelorette did kind of like grab me more, but I feel like there's not like a standout like banger of a song that I would point someone to. The album kind of does work well as a whole. And I don't know, I think I just need more listens on this one as well. But yeah, I am positive on this album, and Bjork continues to be kind of a singular artist. At the same time, you can like see kind of her influences, but like she just like makes them her own, kind of like what Kate Bush did, and all these other kind of artists that she name checks. So thumbs up for me.
Yeah, that song was Pluto, Josh, where she just does the vocal part over and over again, and yeah,
and the strings too. Like that's an interesting element that she added that I liked as well.
Yeah, and some of the songs do sound like Pluto's another good example. That sound like when it comes on, you're like, oh man, this is gonna be like a club banger kind of thing. Like this, but it's like clear, like the way that it continues, and you're like, yeah, that's not really what this is, you know?
Right. Yeah. It keeps you on your toes for sure.
Sure does.